Hey, what's up guys? It's Isa with Journey to Programming. I want to talk about the technical coding interview and specifically whiteboarding during an interview for a software engineering role or a programmer, game developer, web developer, mobile developer, whatever it is. A lot of us have gone through the process of having an interview where we've had to do an online coding round and then we've gone on site and had to do whiteboarding coding and those types of things. And what I really want to talk about is the fact that I think the technical or coding interview is actually useful. It's not necessarily the best way to evaluate somebody's ability to be a good candidate for a role, and I don't think it's the absolute best way to evaluate someone's programming capabilities, but I think it has its use cases in discovering a lot about a candidate. And when used in combination with other kind of interview techniques, it can be very, very helpful. So let's talk about that. I think that in good companies with good interviewers, where they're really looking to fill roles with candidates that are going to work well with not just the role, but also with the team and the company, I think those specific companies do a good job usually interviewing and providing technical interviews that are evaluating not just your ability to solve some arbitrary problem or some algorithm or data structure problem and read back or have some memorized information or facts about the time complexities and stuff like that and space complexities. I think the way they evaluate you and the reason that they do a better job and use this type of technical coding evaluation is to get an idea for how you think, how you problem solve, how you handle difficult or stressful situations where you may have a problem you don't know and you may need to figure it out on your own. And they want to hear how you communicate, how you ask questions, and see basically what you do in a situation where you're asked to solve something that maybe is surprising or maybe you haven't seen before. That is where the technical coding interview really becomes beneficial and is helpful in the evaluation of a candidate. So from the perspective of a company or an interviewer, I'm not going in or asking interviewers to go in and basically quiz you on some algorithms or ask for some optimal solution just for the heck of it, just to annoy you, or just to see if you've been studying your LeetCode code questions. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see if I give you this problem, what kind of questions are you going to ask me about? Are you going to ask for clarifications? That's going to show me your ability to think about the problem and handle maybe weird requests that may come in later on, or a problem that you may face, or a project that comes in that you have to take ownership on. Do you ask questions? Do you ask for clarifications? Do you want to know whether or not your assumptions are correct? Those types of things are really important. It also shows your communication skills for the problem right there. Next, if you can answer the problem at a high level, that is beneficial. Okay, you don't always have to write the code and have your code be spotless and compilable on a whiteboard. That would be great, but you don't have to do that. The big thing is, did you think about the solution? Did you communicate that to the interviewer? And when they're evaluating you, they're taking notes on all of this. Your feedback will probably have some kind of mixture of this information on it. So you want to go ahead and try to explain things and break things down clearly. This is why it's so important to ask questions about the problem statement too, because if you had assumptions that were incorrect, that would have clarified it so that your solution makes more sense. Now, moving on, writing the actual code. Writing compilable code is obviously going to be beneficial to you, but at the same time, it's not 100% necessary. People aren't going to expect you to have memorized the standard library calls or write perfect syntax on a whiteboard or in a text editor without an IDE. Companies are not, let's say, dumb enough to think that just because you can't write code on a whiteboard or in a text editor perfectly or flawlessly, that you don't know how to write code. So don't think that. What they're trying to figure out is, can you solve a problem, so the overall problem statement, break it down into something at a high level, and then take that and write it in some sort of code format that's relatively correct. You get to choose a language most of the time, so can you actually write code in that language? Are you following that general syntax basically properly or appropriately? And as you're going through it, is your logic being written in like a good practice or in the best practice way, right? So depending on the language you have, you may be writing it in a way that's good for that language and fits it well, or you may not, and that may show that you don't have the skills you claim in those languages or the language you chose. Now, the reason that this is really important is because there are a lot of candidates that come in for interviews or go apply for jobs that cannot write code. And it's not that they're necessarily, let's say, not coders or software engineers. It may just be that they don't really understand how to take a problem and those high-level solutions and turn it into code. And for a lot of jobs, you need people to be able to do that. So we want to be able to see if you can, especially if it's a role for like a mid-level or a senior person where you're not going to be handheld through the problems or the assignments you get or the tasks, etc. We want to know that you can break things down and you can actually write code yourself that works, right? So that is why they're asking. You don't have to write perfect code. A lot of people think that you go into this and you have to write flawless code that you could just copy, take a picture, go write it in an IDE, and it will compile instantaneously. That's not true. A lot of people also get annoyed because the role that you're actually going to do doesn't necessarily have interview type questions as any of the part of it, right? And that's mostly true. A lot of us go through the interview process and we do not like the process because it's nothing like the actual day-to-day job. Okay, fair enough. That is a common complaint. I agree with that to an extent. But if you look at the technical coding interview reasoning from that higher level view of it's used to analyze not just your coding ability, but your ability to think, break down problems, communicate, then it lets you see it in a different light, okay? That's why most people just kind of accept, well, I won't say most people, a lot of people just accept the process that you have to learn that stuff or have to prepare for a coding interview because they want jobs. But if you just go ahead and also accept it and realize that they're trying to evaluate you, then you can maybe come forward in those interviews. So this is just a pro tip. You can come forward in those interviews and turn that around. I mean, make yourself better in those interviews. Make yourself a good communicator, a good problem solver, a good high-level thinker, and a good coder so that you can see how they react to you in those situations. See if they're probing for more information. See if they want higher level solutions or if they have better ways to go about it. Ask questions, etc. Those are advantages that you have when you're not constantly worried about writing the code or when you don't hate the process so much that you are going in with this like angry kind of face or mentality and you're not thinking very clearly and you're not thinking in a very kind of fun, kind way that somebody would want to be around you with. Right? So, yeah, I think that there is a place for the coding interview. I think that it is a useful method. And I think that you guys should too. If you take a step back and you think about what I just mentioned, then I hope that helps you guys realize that it's not necessarily all bad. Especially at companies that tend to have teams that work well, tend to find success. And the companies that are not driving you to like 80-hour weeks and just want somebody writing code and don't care, etc. The good companies, they're looking for not just perfect programmers, but people that fit in well and all of that. So it explains that situation. Anyways, I've been an interviewer. I usually interview a little bit like a coding interview. Or I always provide at least like a little segment of it because I want to see how people think and handle the situation because that really does tell me a lot about the person and it lets me basically understand how they're going to handle the job if those type of cases come upon them, right? So anyways, this is Journey to Programming. If you made it to this point in the video, please do hit that subscribe button down below. And if you have any questions or your own feedback or comments, please do just put them down below. Like I said, this is just an opinion video and I've been on both sides of the table. I've been an interviewer. I've also been interviewed a ton of times. I do not always like the process of doing a coding interview and whiteboarding. I used to also think that it was not a good way of measuring somebody's success capability or potential, but I have learned to embrace it to an extent because as I've gone into management and leadership in the past, I've learned how much it can show, especially when I've run my own business, about a candidate's potential ability to fit in and also be successful. We all want you guys to be successful. We all want to be successful, so it can be a useful kind of thing to do during the interview process and learning about candidates. All right, I'll end it there. Have a good one, you guys.